Space might not be the largest part of their revenue today, but it could be one of the fastest growing and the most strategically important for the future.
It's not like we have, this is space industry, only does business inside this industry. It also interconnects, is enabling so many other industries and so many other sectors. That's why it's also very diverse because of that.
The sci-fi world is actually happening because the rockets are going up and all these industries are exploding.
Fusion can be one of the easiest options for us to produce this cheap, clean electricity.
Space is projected to be $1 trillion industry over the next decade.
I think the first one will be full of robots, and hopefully they will build something for us there, and so we can arrive when everything, some basic would be already in place.
Hello and welcome to Wall Street Wildlife with Christoph and Luke, and our very special guest this week, expert venture capitalist Alexandra Vidyuk. Alex, you're a general partner at Beyond Earth Ventures, which is a US-based early-stage deep tech venture investment fund. And you're based in Singapore. You've got a degree in physics and you transitioned to deep tech venture capital after a successful international banking career in London and Hong Kong. And actually, that's where you and I met. So you were very kind to reach out to me and say, hey, Luke, you're an investment guy. So am I. Let's catch up.
Thank you, Luke and Christoph, for having me today. This is exciting. And I love your podcast, by the way. Great job.
Thank you.
Alex, can you tell me whether or how your physics degree has come in handy with what you do? I dabble in the quantum stuff for some years, but trying to apply in the real world, it's hit or miss. But the space industry, I wonder, has that actually come in handy?
Yeah, so when I wanted to be a scientist when I was a kid, so that's why I decided to do a degree in physics. But then after graduation, that was 15 years ago, most of my classmates went to work in management consulting or banking. And I was one of them who went to work for banking. And that was an amazing job, banking. And Luke can definitely relate, right? So that's, glamorous. You have a lot of travel, a lot of challenging tasks, nice people. But 10 years down the line, I was like, okay, kind of coming back to my childhood dreams, what I'm doing now, am I advancing some of the energy crisis or helping with climate crisis, helping to learn about maybe open, kind of some opportunities for scientists or technologists. I was like, actually not much. So I slowly started thinking, how can I transition myself and do a bit more of that as well? And physics degree plus 10 years in banking, what's the best match? Deep tech venture capital. That's what I decided to do. That was 3 years ago. And my physics degree, it a bit rusty now. So I had to kind of brush off some of the kind of things. But, it's I think, kind of mix of finance and science. That's what I like the most about my daily job in venture capital.
I guess you're not just a deep tech angel investment syndicate lead. You also have a popular Substack, Space Ambition. And I wonder about your own space ambition. So, Alexandra, if Elon Musk offered you a seat on the very first commercial mission to begin constructing a permanent base on Mars, would your space ambition compel you to be on that flight?
Maybe not on the first one. I think the first one will be full of robots, and hopefully they will build something for us there, and so we can arrive when everything, some basic would be already in place. So I think definitely I would like to travel. I think space tourism is very hot topic now as well. Lots of people traveling, and it's kind of becoming mainstream. Mars is a little bit different because I think the first couple of missions still would be for scientists or trained astronauts, not for random people like me. But hopefully one day it will be possible travel for normal people. I think if you ask me about what would be my big space ambition, in the ideal world, if we had unlimited capital, unlimited resources, unlimited engineering capability, I would like us to move all toxic productions from Earth to orbit and make sure there's no emissions, no toxic effects of what's happening today, no data centers, and keep Earth clean, nice garden for living, and basically all the manufacturing, all the productions based in orbit. That would be mine. But we're far from that. Still, a lot of things needs to be done. Still, not commercially viable. But that's kind of, I think that's why we're doing space for, right? That's would be my space ambition.
That's beautiful. I like that view of the future. That's like the Star Trek view where we become interstellar, but the Earth is this like beautiful habitat. There are dystopian sci-fi movies though where the Earth is like the trash can, and then we escape the rubbish we've left behind.
Yeah, exactly.
That's such a great place to start, I think, because down here on Earth, I'm guessing the general public has either no idea about the space industry at all, or commonly in the political realm, I hear stuff like, why are we wasting billions of dollars playing around up there when we can't even feed ourselves down here? And so there's this common misperception of billionaires and their high-tech rockets, just ignoring more important stuff down here. How do you see something like, how might you explain in general how you see the space industry from that kind of like critique at the start?
Yeah, that's quite common. I hear it a lot. I think especially like lots of people also come to me and say, "Oh, you're investing in space, but are you a billionaire?" Like only billionaires can invest, right? Like Jeff Bezos, like Elon Musk, and etc. Right? So it's changing very fast, and you're absolutely right. It's not in the like mainstream media. So I mean, even if you remember like Apollo program, what basically brought us to the moon. I mean, us as a as a civilization, right? So we're still using a lot of research, and things have been discovered during that program on a daily life, right? For example, baby formula that was developed during that program, or like some of the a heart pump which we use today in A&E, that was also developed during these programs. Lots of, and if you go to NASA website, you can see lots of examples of how space industry, lots of experiments actually now been like real things we use in the daily life. So as I always say space is not just industry, it's a platform and which enabling so many other industries. And one of them, for example, which is very close to my heart, is climate crisis and sustainability. So actually a lot of things what we do today is all monitored using from satellites, right? So emissions, pictures using, like images from satellites. That's how we understand where we have, greenhouse gases emissions, how do we monitor, where do we need to take some actions, or biotech, exactly the same. So, I invest in one company in the UK, which produces cancer treatment in space, which can change the way how cancer patients live their daily life, right? And this is the only reason why we can do it today is because we have access to space technologies. Mm-hmm. So I think this type of stories I like to tell people is actually, yes, it's not just space, it's not just for billionaires or astronauts or NASA, but it also can improve our daily life. Plus, we can also make money on that because, the industry is growing, and, people who invest now, they not just investing, but also they supporting the future of civilization, or the kind of our technological kind of assets, right, as a civilization.
Yeah, I guess like many private and public companies, like space might not be the largest part of their revenue today, but it could be one of the fastest growing and the most strategically important for the future. I think in today's conversation, we're going to get into a little bit more detail on some of the specific investment themes you're thinking about. But maybe before we go into like where you're seeing investment, am I right to think that like space is projected to be $1 trillion industry over the next decade? Like, can you give us a kind of broad overview of where that $1 trillion comes from?
Yes, sure. So I think as you rightly mentioned, World Economic Forum at McKinsey, they're projecting like tripling the industry. As of today, it's around 500, 600 billion. So that's still small compared to other industries, but it's one of the fastest growing. And like, I mean, all those people, like now, if you read most of the headlines, people say, okay, what's the generational wealth creation opportunity? A lot of people mention about AI, including all the semiconductors, data centers, and everything, quantum and space, right? That's kind of the key topic people normally talk about and read a lot. So it's also important to mention this is like one of the very unique industries which last 25 years it didn't have any like negative growth here, and it also doesn't have, because space typically, or like venture capital, my area is typically kind of considered to be alternative asset class, and space doesn't have any correlation with any other alternative asset classes. It's very unique. So if you think about how people typically split space industry, we talk about satellite communications and connectivity, Earth observation and remote sensing, space infrastructure and logistics, manufacturing, resource extraction, and the big one now is defense and national security. So that's a typical like verticals in the industry. I also like to mention okay, what are the typical use cases which, it's all seems very abstract, right? And people are like, okay, so what does it mean satellites? Where do I go? How do I invest? What does it mean? I don't understand anything, right? I also tried to think about other industries which space can enable, right? We already talked about some crisis, the sustainability, big, on that, biotech, pharma as well, right? It's kind of very up and coming. Mining is another big one. Space tourism we also mentioned, and energy as well. So in space manufacturing also has many different use cases such as semiconductors and so on. So that's kind of, if it's very special, it's not like we have, this is space industry only does business inside this industry. It also interconnects with so many different enabling so many other industries and so many other sectors. That's why it's also very diverse because of that.
Luke, you already mentioned Star Trek. You kind of got ahead of me, but in this notion of sci-fi, Alex, I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but there's like, in my mind anyway, there's like sci-fi when you were a kid or when we were kids, and like everything seems so crazy and far out there, and but it's still a joke, or it's still like it's just people having fun with ideas. Versus now, it seems like, oh my God, like this moment of like, the sci-fi world is actually happening because the rockets are going up and all these industries are exploding. Do you have a sense for that? Like, are we already in this moment sort of living that sort of Star Trekian sci-fi world, or is it still like years, decades away? Like, give us a sense of a little perspective of where we are in terms of like sci-fi stuff.
That's a very good question. I think, we've been first satellites have been launched like, 50s, 60s, 60s, right? So, I mean, we will almost like 100 years in space, and a lot of space already in our daily life. For example, GPS, right? We use it like, every phone, ATM machines, everything, right? So we can't live without that. So sometimes people don't even know that it's kind of so embedded in our daily life. So I think if I generally describe where, like, as of today, that the space industry in, so I think a lot of investments have been done by government bodies in the last 50 years, including NASA and a lot of different space agencies. By the way, we have more than like 70 space agencies now around the world, right? So it's like even small countries have it now, right? And the number of satellites is growing. And now I think that it's about to reach 10,000 satellites in the next couple of years. So the space industry is transitioning from being government-led, like with government budgets, into private sectors, in the private sector, kind of, especially looking into new space companies such as SpaceX, right? And, Rocket Lab and Relativity Space, all of these big names now coming and becoming like publicly traded companies, right? Hopefully, some of them more and more. Hopefully, we will be seen soon. So that's I go to most of like a lot of different space conferences as well, and so the ecosystem is not going to die if you have another crisis. That's so big now. That's so embedded into so many different areas. But in the same time, I would say it's not fully developed yet. It's not like it's, if you compare it to hockey stick cycle, we are just at the beginning of this hockey stick. So it's still a lot of startups. They're still not, reached the stage where there's a big corporation, multinational kind of corporates, right? And they're still growing. It's a lot of capital, a lot of attention attract. We have more capital coming, not just space tech people like me, but also you have private equity, pension funds, sovereign funds now investing heavily in space tech as well. That's a sign that it's from esoteric type of investments becoming more mainstream. And for me, it's good as an investor. I can see that that's stable outlook for the next couple of years in that industry. So to be so the reason why I decided to launch my fund, this time of the specific time of the industry, is because there's several things came to this in the same time. First of all, because of Elon Musk and SpaceX, now it's easy, cheap to launch something to space. So it's a regular flights, anyone can schedule. It's not expensive. Not expensive, it's not expensive enough to open some new business models, right? So people can, if it costs a couple of thousand per kilo, then I can calculate my unit economics. Does it make sense for me to produce something in space or to launch something to space, right? So that's one parameter. Another one is the geopolitical situation, right? So US and China are competing now. Every day you see news about Donald Trump is launching Golden Dome, China is launching something to space, supercomputer to space. People competing who is going to be first on the moon again, right? So 50 years later. So that's creating competition. That's always creating a lot of innovation, a lot of push for who will be the first, who will become, who will position themselves as a leader. That's good for me as an investor because I can invest in these startups and invest in these technologies, which can hopefully be part of this kind of back to the moon journey. So another thing is about defense. You probably are aware about how big are defense budgets now. That's also good because space and defense, there are a lot of overlap, lot of joint projects, lots of dual use technologies which you can use for defense and for civil applications. And what I normally say, for me, if the defense budgets, if the technology can accelerate development next 2-3 years on defense budget, and then it can turn into civil applications, that for me as an investor is actually a good sign. It's a good trajectory for my companies. And generally now we have AI, we have robotics, and AI and robotics doesn't, for some industries it accelerates them, for some industries it kills them. For space, it's definitely acceleration. So a lot of things happening in space using robotics, using AI. For example, how do we navigate satellites using AI, right? So a lot of software now designed, autonomous navigation, all the drones, all the rovers, everything is of course gonna be enhanced using these AI algorithms. Of course, most of the things we do in space is done by robots, right? Doesn't matter if it's someone on the moon, if it's something in orbit, some lab robot who is doing something. That's kind of, as of today, I think that's definitely a good sign. So basically for me, we just have it's right now, it's a perfect moment to, for the industry and for us as investors to actually look at, what's going on. Not every sector, not every area in the space industry is going to grow with the same speed. Not every, especially sector is a VC model as well, because I'm looking at very specific business models. So, but I do think it's a good place for me to be now, and a good place for me to find some very interesting, hopefully next SpaceX, next NVIDIA, next OpenAI. That's what we're all looking for, right?
It's interesting you say that some elements of the industry are nearer and some are much further away. Do you as a VC, do you use that to kind of inform your own investment priorities? Like, do you have a sense of where the biggest growth is going to be over the next 3 to 4 years, perhaps?
So maybe just a little bit background, what do we do as a VC? I'm not sure how well your followers know aware about what's happening, like what we do. So as a VC, I'm looking for highly scalable business models. So as an early stage VC, so we invest in companies pre-seed, seed, Series A. That means that our target is 100x for each potential startup. Doesn't mean that most of them, 90% of them, will probably go default, but the ones which will make me 100x will make the fund, and that's hopefully like typical process. So it means that I need to see a multi-billion market. I need to see that the company, the technology is transformative. It's not like 1 or 2 government contracts and the company is going to be stable for 20 years. I want to see the company to, basically should experience exponential growth in the next couple of years. Ideally, my lifetime of my fund is like 7 to 10 years, typically what people do in the industry. So within that period of time, I should see potential to have exponential growth. If you generally think about, the verticals which I mentioned, some of them very old, established, for example, satellite communications. Yes, of course, you do see disruptions such as Starlink, for example, Elon Musk. Like this year, I think the first time when it compresses SpaceX launch business, right? In terms of revenue, we have OneWeb in the UK. That's a disruption areas, disruption technologies. We also see companies who come and say, oh, now I can, build better satellites, faster, cheaper, more we use 3D printing or we use something else. So, and then we can disrupt the whole old manufacturing, like old space industry with a new specific, for example, component for satellites. That's also disruption. But that means that I'm looking in an old, well-established market. I'm looking for disruption technologies. That one thing, right? That's one kind of model of my framework, how I can look. Another one is, for example, fastly growing businesses, such as in-space manufacturing is a good example. As of today, we have 2 stations in orbit, ISS, which is like it's a consortium of different countries. NASA is, I think, is the main one, but also I think there's so many different countries. ISS is now being decommissioned. Means that it's been already 20 plus years in orbit, conducted several thousands of experiments, but it's very old, it has to be decommissioned. There's a new stations that have been built now by a number of private companies such as Axiom, VAST, Starlab, Voyager. Voyager, by the way, is going to submitted the IPO papers, right? So that's kind of another example of going public. But they are building stations not just for people to come and do experiments, but also to build real business. For example, building labs for production of, biopharma products in space, semiconductors, data centers, which will be storing data in space instead of having it on Earth. So, and in this specific area, we don't really have any established businesses yet. So all of them might grow with the same speed, right? So that's why I'm looking at all of the potential technologies, innovation, and startups and see, okay, which of them will grow faster, for example, which of them have more sustainable business models, which of them has more demand on Earth, right? Okay, so if it's a pharma businesses, okay, so who has already contracts, agreements, and signed some kind of letter of intent with big pharma houses, big pharma companies. So that's another mindset, framework. Okay, how we can see them. We also look at the businesses which has 2 business lines. For example, one terrestrial, one is space. Then for me it's easier because, okay, let's say my latest investment, Zeno Powers, which is in nuclear batteries for military use, but also for space use. Okay, so how are we going to power Mars, Moon, orbital, satellites? That's we don't have. Most of the reliable opportunity is to have nuclear batteries. That's one of the potential technologies. Okay, but it's exactly the same how we use in the middle of the ocean, in a desert, in bunkers, right? So that's crazy. Okay, I have multi-billion market on Earth, but also have multi-billion exponentially growing market in space. That's another kind of framework I'm using. Okay, it doesn't have to be only space. It can be also terrestrial market, but at some point it will be growing in space. That's another good example. So that's how I typically think. I think most of the deep tech VCs, they also think in terms of, okay, I'm looking at the vertical. Okay, what are the players here? What's the kind of, what are the trends? What are technological, political, economical trends here? How do I make the bet? Okay, if I'm going to choose 1, 2 leaders, put the bet there. And as I believe that's like, what's my perception of the future in that specific sector. So that's, yeah, I think that's kind of the high level thinking here.
Wall Street Wildlife is brought to you by the Chit Chat Stocks podcast. My name is Ryan.
And my name is Brett.
And we're the hosts of the show.
On Chit Chat Stocks, we are constantly researching new stocks from high flyers to undiscovered small caps, diving deep into business models, debating competitive advantages, dissecting valuations, and we have a fun time while doing it.
Supercharge your investing research and start listening to the podcast today. You can follow the Chit Chat Stocks podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Follow the show so you never miss an episode. That is the Chit Chat Stocks podcast.
Do you have a sense whether, like in with analogy to the AI race right now, there's this feeling that the winner, there's going to be a winner, and it's just so important for either the US or say China to be the winner because everything else follows from that. Is the same kind of thinking happening in space where there's this mentality you have, in order to win, in order to get this massive exponential growth, to get the scale, you have to be the first? Or is space such a huge frontier that it's going to be multiple winners?
There's a very interesting saying in VC world which says, it works like a charm, like, the third attempt, right? So many technologies, the first 2 waves of technologies typically fail. And then the third wave, it works. For example, asteroid mining, right? So we already seen the 2 waves of, a number of different startups trying to do the same thing. I think it started 15 years ago, first wave, and then now we have the second wave. And people even say even now it might not be the right time because you need to have, demand, technology readiness, economic, the unit economics has to work, right, for all of this to be able to work. So sometimes people say, okay, we'll see that maybe the first one will fail. We'll wait for if we have the proven demand, the proven economics, then okay, we will invest. So I don't think that, in some markets, for example, launch, it's 90% is SpaceX, right? But people still say that, okay, now everyone wants to have their own national launcher, on soil, on a specific, kind of country, right? And people say, yeah, but this is only for big or small, right? So we want to have something for smaller. Why do we always launch big rocket? We should have a medium size, a small size rocket. So there's kind of still markets for that, right? So in terms of the orbital station, for example, private stations, it's exactly the same, right? So there's no one big contract which everyone is fighting for. Of course, the first one, it would be the people who will replace ISS. But if we are going to create demand for a lot of other businesses, it doesn't really matter. One can specialize in robotics lab for biotech, another one can specialize in touristic or maybe entertainment industry. Okay, let's do some entertainment show in space, and we can can be different business models around that.
Didn't Tom Cruise, he's filmed or he's about to film something on the ISS?
I think yeah, I saw it in the news as well. I think it just happened maybe, or hopefully we'll see some movie. I find it kind of probably very expensive, but it's cool to make it more public.
Yeah, I would definitely rather see Cruz up there than Katy Perry.
Yeah.
Poor Katie. Everyone's mad at Katie.
Yes, yes, but I mean, people say there's no such a thing as a bad PR. I mean, I was reading all these comments, but I was like, at least people talk about that. At least people talk about, oh, Blue Origin, actually you can book a flight. Anyone can book a flight now, right? So, still, I think attracted enough attention for people to start thinking about, maybe I should buy a ticket as well.
I wouldn't feel too sorry for her. I saw a Reddit article yesterday that she's making $900,000 per show for her Las Vegas residency.
Yeah, so who's the dummy?
She could fund like a bunch of space missions with that kind of income.
Exactly.
Should we dive, because we've talked in outline and we've touched on like a number of these investment themes, but I'd be quite keen to go a bit deeper on some of them and just kind of, really understand your expert view on, for example, how is space helping us with biotech, semiconductors, mining, private orbital stations, that sort of thing. Do you want to sort of pick one and let's start going down a bit of a rabbit hole?
Yeah, sounds good. You mentioned biotech is the first one. Let's start with that. So we did complete some of the understanding of what's happening in the industry, and in the last 20 years or so, more than I think around 2,000 experiments have been conducted on ISS. That was mainly research, experiments. Talking about stem cells, production of cancer treatment, vaccines, even IVF, embryos, so many different things. But these experiments have been just pure research because it was super expensive, difficult to book, no opportunities to scale. Because now it's all changing, because easier to launch, now building kind of real estate in space, private stations, Elon Musk is building Starship, and some people say we don't even need private station. We can just, keep the Starship flying around the Earth. That's already one Starship is already bigger than whole ISS, right? So that will gives us the space for build some lab or small manufacturing facility in space. Plus, also, how do you bring it back? Now we do have capsules. And one of the companies which I closely following, which called Varda, which probably now one of the market leader in terms of the kind of in-space manufacturing. It's already big. It's I think they just closed Series B. So they just done 2 return capsules back to Earth as well. So it's kind of a routine process now. Launch something, then manufacture something, bring it back to Earth. That's kind of in a nutshell. That's what people would like to do, right? And hopefully at some point it will become as a not even remarkable anymore to even talk about it, right? So example of so I already mentioned about one of my portfolio companies that doing crystallization of protein in space. And the reason why it is much better in space is because the molecules of protein, they're very geometrically complex. So if you grow them big, they collapse, and you can only grow them to some certain size. That means but in zero gravity, in microgravity, they can grow bigger. So there is no gravity which collapsing them, and they grow more symmetrical, more pure, and bigger. For cancer patient, that means that they can switch from a drip to an injection. And imagine if you have a cancer that you don't have to go and every day to a hospital and have a nurse putting needle into your vein, but you can actually inject yourself at home. And that's a huge lifestyle change. It's also a huge potential, because it's a new patent, right? For example, that's for pharma company that can also, get a huge new revenue stream for. It's good for everyone, right? And the reason why it is possible today, let's say approximately 1 kilo of this protein costs $100K. We don't know exact number yet, but I think that's what number kind of I've heard approximately. So if you want to launch something to space which costs, let's say, $2K, again approximately, build something there, the robots will create you these proteins, and you send this box back home, which will be also probably a couple of thousand. The numbers are not public yet. That you still have the margin right? That's a real business. It's not like, a research experiment anymore. So another company I invested in the UK as well, it's as an angel investor. It's called Space Forge. They do similar thing, but they do it for semiconductors. So the semiconductors, the compound crystals which you can grow in space, again, because of the zero gravity, because of the deep vacuum, because of the special conditions, you can't reproduce on Earth. Deep vacuum is super difficult to do. Microgravity, you can't reproduce because we can't. It's physics, right? We can't break it. So the compound crystals for semiconductors, they grow 10 times longer in space and 3 to 5 times more pure than on Earth. That means that if you produce semiconductors from them and use them on Earth, they will consume 50% less electricity than they need. And that's, imagine, for us, we already have so many, we already have energy crisis, we already have, people complaining about all data centers, taking all the energy, we don't have enough supply, we have emissions, blah, blah, blah. That can potentially, offset some of these issues already. So that's kind of just a couple of examples of what can be done. But I've seen companies, because I have lots of decks, from different startups, but basically people. So these ISS experiments, which I mentioned to you, these are public data. Anyone can go on the website, look at this, what has been done, the results. And a lot of people now, like a new generation of entrepreneurs come in, right, and say, oh, let me look at this. Okay, there's one. Okay, organoids hasn't been done yet. Okay, I'm going to call the scientists. I'm going to create a pitch deck, find money, apply for grant, done. This is a startup going, right? So previously, I think previous generation of entrepreneurs have been mainly like engineers and scientists, but now we see lots of people coming, from outside of these areas and just kind of a bit more, general view. Okay, let me find a co-founder who's a scientist, and I'm just going to do a startup based on that, which is great. Which is that's exactly what happened in I think the internet in 1990s. The first wave was again engineers, software coders, and now people, actually that's how we can make money here. And a lot of not normal, but generalist founders came to the play, right? So I think that's what's happening now. I mean, that's my hope. That's what will be happening more and more in space industry as well.
Alex, can I ask you, because this is so, I'm learning so much about this. I came into this conversation with the view that something like biotech, like space, would be the worst place for it because of things like, my understanding of astronauts going up there and their muscles, atrophy, and they have to exercise all the time. But even if they exercise, when they come back to Earth, it's just so much worse or harder. So this notion that there's aspects of space that do things even better than on Earth, it still feels kind of shocking and almost like hard to believe. Maybe another example is, down here on Earth, we experiment a lot with animals and with mice, but then it works on the mouse, but then you try to transfer it to the human and it doesn't translate. So are you saying what I think you're saying, that there is this almost way in which the counterintuitive truth is the truth?
So, I mean, some of the COVID vaccines have been formulated on ISS, right? So, I was reading some of the articles about that. It's actually fascinating, right? That you can almost say that space helped us to beat COVID, right? I do think that there's a difference between people actually being in space and on the moon, because we have a lot of issues with radiation, protection, and generally I don't think the space can make you younger, right, or more healthier if you go there often, right, if you stay long. At least we don't have enough data to prove that's that kind of the real, because how many people have been to the moon? Only 12, right? It's not significant number to actually to kind of make any conclusions. But in terms of producing something in space to make you healthier, younger, or kind of some anti-aging treatments, that's definitely a big thing. A lot of people look at it, a lot of people do it, lots of research has been conducted. So I started seeing people doing organoids, stem cells, cancer treatment for sure. And some of the things we don't even know what's happening, because lots of big pharma companies now booking the flights with these companies, doing experiments, filing the patents, which we don't know. But I think what I've heard, like Varda is fully booked for next couple of years by pharma companies, right? So that means that there's definitely kind of all of this research has now trying to be commercialized and actually in real products. Yeah, it's different, right? Like one thing is you use something which was produced in space. Another thing, you go to space. I don't think you're going to have anti-aging treatment hotel in orbit. Definitely, probably not in the current decade, for example, but maybe later. Yeah, but it's still harsh to go there. But doesn't mean we can use the products out of there.
Christoph doesn't need those. He's young and handsome looking as he is. You're already a space monkey. I guess you talked about biotech and semiconductors. I guess there are, like in my mind, you see, say, like in TSMC, like their manufacturing facility, and the people who are building semiconductors on Earth, like they're wearing almost like spacesuits in these environments because they have to be like ultra clean. And I guess that's a huge advantage of being in space, right? You've got like hard vacuum, probably don't get a much cleaner environment. But then, as you say, challenges around radiation, thermal dissipation. Like we think about space as being really cold, but actually, I guess because there's a vacuum, my layman's understanding it's quite hard to get rid of heat, and heat is a big problem when you're in like operating some of these manufacturing processes.
Like it's one of the biggest debates. It's like if you follow, for example, I do follow Y Combinator every cohort very closely, and you start seeing that a lot of companies, actually lots of space companies now maybe 2-3 companies every cohort you see that. And one of the companies was Lumen Orbit, which they started doing edge computing in space, and like they now pivot to data centers in space. And data center space is such a good pitch, right? I mean, if you like think about like very high level, you have solar energy there. You don't need to come up with a separate. And there's no clouds. There's no day and night. You can just constant, solar energy supply. It's cold. You don't need to cool it, and you have all the satellites there, so you can connect directly to the internet again very fast. And there's no FBI can come, so it's a physical security as well, right? So there's no Chinese can put the plug or FBI can knock your door and say, hey, we arrest your data center. It's security and safety as well. Plus, you don't need to worry about how they go, which data privacy rule we have to use, right? Because it's like all up there, right? So it's much easier. I mean, that's kind of easy sell, but then you exactly would start thinking about what you just mentioned. Okay, how long actually we can, sustain a supercomputer in space with all the the architecture of computer has to be different. So much layers of protection. We can't control, the redundancy procedures has to be different. The heat exchange as well, exactly. Easy to say, oh, it's cold there. we don't need, but what's happening today is, it's getting cool because of water, liquid, or because of the air, right? And how do you replicate exactly the same in space? I mean, I would like to see what are the engineering solutions they come up with. But I think I've seen already maybe 5 or 7 different startups pitching me data centers in space. And I would like to see how, what would be the, even Amazon, I think they had some projects about that, like AWS. So, and if you look at I'm not sure if it's a speculation or not, but Eric Schmidt recently became an investor and CEO of Relativity, right? And one of the things he mentioned is because it's like because he wants to build data centers in space, or kind of launch data centers. And kind of, if you think about data centers, we need more data centers, we need more powerful for AI, for LLMs, but we keep building them here. It's kind of keep causing lots of issues for our environment. Why don't you move it to the orbit, right? It's kind of logical, but I still would like to see how it will, present itself. Hopefully, we'll see it in the next couple of years. That's actually one of the big things everyone is waiting for.
One of the companies I did a Safari stock short 5-minute pitch on is Planet Labs. Can you tell us a little bit more about them from your perspective and the industry, the kind of analytics from above and how that changes our understanding of what happens on planet Earth?
This is like the area what we are talking about is called Earth observation. That's basically lots of satellites flying around. It's different radar technologies, different on different orbits, right? And they produce different pictures of, it can be optical, it can be infrared, it can be hyperspectral, multispectral, SAR, whatever. So basically imagine that any type of kind of image you need to have, right? Or you want to have. So as of today, this mainly used by government, right? So by defense people who, so we want to understand what's happening in Ukraine, we want to understand what's happening in Israel, we want to monitor what's happening in China, and lots of budgets go into this monitoring, right? What we also started noticing is that financial sector is now coming into this play and saying, okay, can we monitor the ships movements, right? Can we use it for the trading, commodity trading? Can we actually monitor what's happening here with the swimming pool? Can we approve it for mortgage? I need to sign the insurance contract. Can I use it? Can I understand what's happening in that farm, for example? How are they claiming they have, the same harvest as they said last year or not? So agriculture is the same, right? So like, when is the right time to start doing harvest? If you have a big estate, so satellites can also provide some of this information. I live in Singapore, so in Singapore, it's like it's a island nation, right? So illegal fishing, all the monitoring of traffic, the maritime traffic as well, right? Potentially, obviously it's getting very hot, because of the climate change, right? So what's the water level? Is it rising? Is it rising? How fast? Where it's rising? Do we need to take any action on that? So plus, if you think about now what's happening with this lot of fires now, right? What happened in LA, right? Like earlier this year, right? So how faster emergency actions and that's definitely a big thing using satellite images. But more interesting, what I like to see is emerging trends. For example, how to use Earth observation for mining. That's like one of the industries which hasn't been using it much, but I think now I can see a lot of mining companies started thinking about that. And the good thing about satellite images or satellite, the different radar technologies, is they can see what's not just on the surface, but also underneath the surface. And I've seen some of the cases when using the satellite data plus geological survey data plus some of the historical data plus maybe some of the other data sources, you can actually understand where it is to potentially, you need to do a new mine, and that can save you 3 to 4 years geological surveying. For the mine company, is huge, right? Plus, as you can imagine, we have less and less deposits now left on Earth. So find the new deposit faster than your competition, develop them faster, develop the new mines, and that's very kind of transformative technology, right, for the industry. So also maybe not very obvious, but it doesn't have to be optical or hyperspectral, for example, or like LiDAR technology, which also possible. But also, like, some people say, okay, if we have a tree is growing on sand which has gold like, underneath, infrared image would be different from, a tree growing on the sun. There's no gold. So like, this like more advanced techniques, I think more kind of research, kind of scientific methods that they use. But yeah, I think that's, I think also I see a lot of, already mentioned about environment protection. But lots of people say, oh, we have climate crisis, we need to kind of take these actions, we need to like, change the way how we, use our tax and everything. Lots of complaints about that, lots of, but do we actually have data to base that on? Do we actually understand what's happening today, every single moment, real time, what are emissions happening? We don't. So one of my, I think a couple of years ago, I looked at the, we did the due diligence in one of the companies. So we realized we have 36 satellite constellation planned or already in orbit, trying to monitor the greenhouse emissions, and we still don't understand the full picture of what's happening today. So we don't actually have a model of, okay, so where is the CO2 emissions, there is methane emissions, like everything, right? So that's still not enough data. So, and that hopefully now the regulation is changing, and people would be more following these emissions in more details. Big companies such as Aramco and like the other like giants, oil and gas, and I don't know, they will have to follow. They will have to do reporting properly. So that will hopefully give like this kind of more demand for this satellite constellation. And I think another one is urban planning as well. So I spoke to one of the startups as well. They mentioned like now, because you have so high quality images, now you can actually, again, mix the satellite data with NHS data, for example, in the UK. And then I can even tell people, so if you have some issues with your lungs, you have to walk on that side of the road, not that side of the road, because they can say, okay, that side of the road has more pollution, which is amazing, right? That's not just the city planning, but it's also like your personal health planning, right? And it's like so unfortunately, I don't think that this market's demand in general kind of it's not fully developed yet. I think that we don't have enough satellite data. It's expensive. It's difficult to get. We don't have it like something like marketplace where I can just go and buy satellite data immediately. It's difficult to use. It's not like a spreadsheet. You need to hire special people who will understand it, who will, special kind of data science skills, and they kind of they can process and make sense of the data. But what I do hope is happening today is that all of these things, all the problems which I mentioned, they hope like they're improving. So we have new satellites going up. They are more powerful. They have better resolution. They have more. The data is more regular. We do have software companies which are building marketplaces, which not just one data provider, but several. You can buy them together. You can buy easy. You can basically like Amazon style of shopping. You just click and buy. And we also have LLMs now coming up, which can help us to translate this data into the insights and actionable insights. Not just look at the pictures. I don't understand what is it like. Where is the mission here? can't make sense. So that's all thing happening, and Planet was still one of the pioneers. People made a lot of money on that investment as well. So I know people personally who invested like early stage. Now they say it's expensive. It's a bit like dinosaur, but because new companies are coming with better resolution, cheaper price options, more innovative technologies, and but I think it's definitely the area to watch, and maybe some of the areas are saturated already, like for example like optical, but a lot of people now, my peers investors, are looking at the hyperspectral lidar, and infrared images. that's kind of the areas which I think still not fully not like we don't have many competition there, and still a lot of potential.
Huge potential for business. I really liked your NHS example, though. Are there, like, I'm a huge fan of Google Earth, and when I'm traveling somewhere, like, I usually put on my Oculus Rift and then go visit the place in VR before I get there, and that's enabled by this incredible resolution, like relatively recent satellite data. So a bit like your NHS example, though, are there other like fun websites or tools or things that our listeners could go play with and use some of this data themselves to maybe make their own lives better?
It's a good question. So, but by the way, there's a good series on Netflix about Google Earth. If you Google Maps, Google Earth, if you haven't checked this, I think it's called like a $1 million code. It's about German startup, which I think originally claimed they did it, but then Google kind of stole it. I'm not sure, but so it's an interesting story. So I did enjoy it. It's good. So I think there's a marketplaces now. So like, for example, like Skyfi is one of the companies which we looked at, and then you can basically go and, I mean, it's still very professional, right? So you can kind of more like, okay, kind of corporate oriented marketplace. But I'm not sure. It's a good question. Let me maybe search it out. I'll send you a couple of links if I find something after the podcast. That's a good question, actually, because it's like B2C, right? You're talking about? I know B2B stuff, but B2C is interesting. Yeah.
Alex, can you talk to us a little bit about the moon? I still have such an ordinary perspective on this rock floating out there. I understand there's some water trapped that might be useful, but other than that, what's this thing up there for? Like, are we heading towards a future where there's going to be like base camps, and where does the moon fit into your world and perspective?
Yeah, exactly. So I think first of all, maybe a little bit like high level, why people would like to go to the moon, right? Because I think that there is some kind of course, there's a helium-3. You probably heard about this, which is a very, very rare element, which is created by solar radiation coming to the moon. We don't have it on Earth because we have atmosphere which protecting us in magnetic field, but the moon doesn't have it, so that's why it's been created over time there. So helium-3 is the most expensive, I think, element today on Earth. I think it's like 300 million kilogram. Maybe you have to double check with Wikipedia, but that's it's very difficult to produce. And it's interesting as it's required for quantum computing and for fusion reactions, right? And you're probably not sure if you're following the energy sector, but there's a lot of kind of innovation and technological breakthroughs happening in fusion, and people actually, because we do have increased demand in electricity, and fusion can be one of the easiest options for us to produce this, cheap, clean electricity. And companies such as Commonwealth Fusion, for example, they claiming they're almost there with the reaction and with stable kind of fusion production of electricity. So that's what can happen. We can see maybe 2 or 3, 4 startups I've seen who are trying to do harvest of helium-3 on Earth and bring it back. And again, kind of the same logic, kind of, now it's like, even taking into account how much you have to pay to get there, harvest there with robots, landers and everything, and bring it back, it's still, you still have some margin. So that's became possible in recent years. It wasn't possible before. So plus the moon, you have water which you can build. One of the so if you're interested about the moon, I definitely highly recommend to watch For All Mankind series. It's like one of the best ones which I've seen about the potential economy, what can happen on the moon in orbit and on the Mars, and then asteroid belts as well. So that's kind of they think they have like 4 seasons, each of them focused on specific business kind of development. So, and that they actually talk a lot about helium-3 there, how they built the empire. around that. But also moon. So if we ever going to go to Mars, or kind of frequent routine flights to the asteroids kind of belts, and like mine something there which we don't have on Earth and bring it back, that possibly we're not going to launch from Earth. We're probably going to launch from the moon, because it's much less fuel you need to have, much easier to launch, because there's not much gravity as on Earth, and I don't have atmosphere and everything. So that can be our like launch pad for the rest of the solar system.
Do you think
Yeah.
when we were, none of us were alive during the first moon landing? Do you think, first of all, when is the next moon landing scheduled? And do you think humanity and our industry, do you think we will be as excited as people were back in the late 60s? Is it, or is it like a different thing entirely now in terms of like psychology and what it would mean for the second round?
Yes, so that's I think I already mentioned about China-US competition around about the moon. So what's happening on a high level today in the US? I don't know, unfortunately, what's happening in China much. I can only follow the main press, but we work with the US a lot. We actually see startups applying for different grants and everything. So I do have a bit more insights. So there's a big program which called Artemis, and the Artemis is kind of a sister of Apollo, and Apollo was the previous moon landing 50 years ago. So that was so now they want to say, oh, it's a female sister, twin sister. So that's why I call it Artemis, right? So that's the consortium of different countries. I think is still NASA led, but like it's kind of also many other countries. They are building a big program. We think it's like $93 billion, huge, right? So and this is a multi-year program. So they want to not just come back to the moon once and come back and say tick box done, but they actually want to build a permanent base and permanent station to kind of to have a presence. And I think at some point it's like I think I've heard about like 1,000 people can stay on the moon all the time. So that kind of the ambition of the infrastructure there, right? So and this is 100 billion program. It's not executed by government. It's actually distributed between private sectors. So you have anyone can apply for like a grant, and it can be Boeing, it can be Airbus, it can be a startup which was created yesterday, right? And then if you do have the right team, right technology, right track record, they say, okay, fine, this is that's what we try to deliver this piece of infrastructure. If you do it well, they give you bigger contract. If you do it well, then you become a kind of preferred supplier, and then you can be part of this big program. So, and that's what we are closely monitoring, because we do have one of the portfolio companies, Lunar Outpost, which actually provides lunar mobility. So rollers, robots, like some small kind of other technology pieces, right? So they won like big multi-billion contract, multi-million contract. Now they're even trying to kind of get more contracts. But and if let's say a startup will win one of these contracts, this become a fundamental foundational technology for the moon, right? And that's how that's kind of our VC thinking here. Okay, if you're ever going to build moon economy, that we want to be we want our companies to be foundational for that. So not just the first government money, but then anyone else who's building anything there will be using this technology as well. So and the Chinese program, they've been sending regularly drones, probes there. They sending the samples back, analyzing them, found the water, confirmed some of the dark side of the moon as well. So that's kind of it's very active. Now we have the first private lander happened just a couple of weeks ago, that everyone was like most of my colleagues were like watching it in real time. And we have another one landed as well recently. I was, I think, kind of not exactly the 100% success mission, but was still okay. So that's kind of on a high level. This is still, as of today, a government-led 100%. We don't have any specific kind of, we do have like, exceptional cases of people trying to do, okay, as I mentioned about helium-free, about like some other stuff. Maybe I've seen some projects trying to do data centers on the moon as a disaster recovery, or as a, what will happen if you have like a huge cyber attack, or, like the crisis on Earth, that you still have data, you still have your servers, you still have data centers on the moon. That's kind of this is not ideas, it's actually real businesses today. Still small, still kind of startup scale, but people do that. There's a demand. No, it's not like research. It's like small contracts, but people continue doing that. So yeah, and then one day hopefully it will be like like in the series, some kind of base, and you can travel and become a tourist.
Yeah, fantastic. And Christoph, you misstated it. I was alive when the last time we had humans on the moon. That was December 72. So maybe I was like a 11-month-old burgeoning sci-fi fan. I think Artemis 2 or 3, like, is it 2027? Is the next planned like boots on the ground on the moon?
So I think there's a lot of, I'm trying to understand what will happen, because the Trump administration is now they just hired a new NASA administrator, and I think they're kind of reconsidering all the budgets for NASA, for Artemis, and some of the architectural decisions as well. So I think the Lunar Gateway station, I think now, they proposed to demise it. I think, and also it was a very huge, expensive rocket, SLS, which now I think they also propose to maybe replace it with Starship. So I think the timeline is, is approximately what you mentioned, but we don't know exactly what would happen when, because I think we're still waiting for the new budget to be approved.
Well, at least we've got Musk running Doge, and we know Musk is a space fan, so hopefully he's not going to like cut the purse strings too hard.
Most of the people think it's positive for our industry, right? The new administration, the closeness of Musk and Trump. Well,
look, if Trump doesn't put like a Trump hotel on the moon in the next like decade or two, right? What's he playing at?
To be honest, that's, for me as an investor, is amazing, right? It's like, oh, attention, but kind of, because the good thing about all of these business ideas and business use cases, because it will drive the whole business, the whole industry in, right? So the more satellites we have on orbit, we need to repair, we need to replace, we need to have connectivity for them, we need to have maintenance, like we need to have logistics between orbit, right? So like we need to have monitoring, right? So that's kind of creates many other companies, many other services. So it's like it's a whole ecosystem growing, right? If someone wants to build hotel on the moon, that needs energy. We need to produce kind of food. We need to recycle. We need to have robots there. We need to have everything, right? So it's great. It's like, for me, it's good.
This sounds to me like a perfect opportunity to introduce a little controversy to our show. What's a podcast without controversy? Luke and I have been going back and forth for a little while on what I think the public most understands as the space race, which is SpaceX and a lot of Elon Musk's claims about Starlink. And then there's this new company, or newish pre-revenue, ASTS Space Mobile, which recently had a lot of visitors from senators and US government. And then there's this, it's kind of like it is a little bit of a war, and then there's a lot of, I think, information and misinformation. Do you have a sense in terms of, like, say, something like the Golden Dome project? Do you have a sense of which horse is winning? If you were to invest in one of these two companies, do you favor one or the other, or is there some third place that we might yet ought to be looking?
I wish I knew it, first of all, and second, I'm not sure if I knew it, I would tell you. but like, So in terms of what so first of all, now SpaceX now, like the latest valuation was 350 million. According to some rumors, now it's less, right? Because some people trying to get out of that and trying to sell. But I mean, we SpaceX still projected to be like at least trillion company, right? And according to some analyst reports. And some people say it's even uncapped, right? Because I think if you look at the latest report, I think it's already got like 16 billion contract, right, from the US government, and launch Starlink, connectivity, the satcom business, and future Mars, and all of this. We don't know what would be the scope of the business of SpaceX, right? And the ambition of Elon, we know, is also uncapped, right? So what type of businesses he will bring? And I think some people like, some people don't like Musk, but we can't challenge his ability to pivot, and build great businesses, right? So that's definitely his track record. So we also have this saying, right? In some of the VC world, people say, "Don't invest in launch." That's already done. It's not. It's like the market is saturated, right? So so some people say that. I think that I already mentioned that. I think probably SpaceX is very popular now. It's as kind of liquidity. It's still private company, but it's liquid as public, right? So it's a lot of opportunities to buy and sell as well. So I don't want to give any investment advice here. So
Like Christoph portrays it as a controversy. I want to throw like another name in though, which is my favorite of all three, and I own all of these now. Like I've got a bit of SpaceX and ASTS, but my favorite company in this space is Rocket Lab. I think they're doing some incredible stuff, and it's probably going to be rocky for shareholders as they transition to their Neutron program, where they start to have like a heavier launch than their kind of small launch capacity now. But do you have any views on their future?
I think Rocket Lab is an iconic company, and I think it's definitely a good example how Peter is an amazing founder, right? So he completely changed the whole. He's coming from a country where like New Zealand never had any space tech, even the engineering kind of program at any of the universities there, right? And then he's coming from a completely different background, and now Rocket Lab it's. I also think made some money on Rocket Lab last year, so it's good to monitor what's happening there. But I think that they need to. I think the problem is like it's highly reactive to news, right? So coming back to your question about Golden Dome. That's potentially a 50 billion project, which will be, distributed between private companies such as SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and now they say Andurils as well, right? So that's we still don't know exactly what. I watch news every day. I read all the reports I can find about that. I do have my agents also kind of trying to kind of go like all the different conferences in the US and try to understand what's happening there. I would say definitely something for us to watch very closely. And if I were to make my bet, I would probably say that probably Rocket Lab, SpaceX, Andurils. That's the big, fast-moving new space giants. But I think in 1990s that probably would be like Boeing and Airbus. Now I think would be mix old space and new space, but also probably I am biased because I'm a early stage VC investor. I would like to see more new space companies and startups companies because I do think they can deliver fast. I do think they can iterate. I do think they can innovate with a very different speed than big corporations, and it's much easier if the US want to be competitive and the same level of innovation as China. they will have to use, they will have to invest in these companies. But I mean, we do have, of course, the R&D teams of big corporations, but I think still most of the innovations predominantly coming from the startups, especially in the US.
I guess you've got there's a huge number of private companies in operating this area, and I'm sure that's your focus. But for our audience who are predominantly public market investors, are there particular companies that you might direct our attention to, either ones that are like directly in the space sector, or maybe like terrestrial companies, public companies that you think are really going to benefit from space?
Definitely, like companies like Google and Amazon, right? AWS already kind of openly showing interest, right? And a track record of innovation in area. Project Cooper, for example, from Amazon, right? It's another kind of, it's like Starlink kind of competitor, right? So Jeff Bezos, of course, he has his own kind of, space company. And I do think that there's going to be some collaboration in the future, kind of how do we bring space innovation back to Amazon? Google is the same. I hope that it will also, now we don't have many public companies in the LLM space, but I think slowly, I think some people say that, imagine like if LLM companies such as OpenAI and other will start buying space data, right? And start basically, you can like almost like chat bot. Oh, can you show me, this image, what's happening in that side of the boat? Or can you calculate me how many cows in my farm right today? Something like this. So that's hopefully will be a trend as well. That's definitely kind of something which will benefit. I think anyone can take an advantage of in-space manufacturing. Big pharma companies which will, kind of explore the innovation in that area. Semiconductors as well, companies who produce it, all kind of cheap manufacturing, who can take advantage of better materials produced in space or better some kind of compounds, right? What they produce. Anything which can benefit from better connectivity and better navigation. So I think that's the trend will definitely happen. So Starlink is one. We have more things happening in that sector. The GPS signal is getting better, and I think it will be replaced hopefully soon. Not replaced, but as many private players coming into space. And one of my portfolio companies, Xona Space Systems as well, they are producing kind of another satellite constellation which will improve our positioning, like accuracy of GPS signal from 3 meters to 10 centimeters, right? And imagine what will happen when we have our phones and everything which has a chip will know exactly we'll know like 10% accuracy, the location. That's not just, it just 10x for many businesses, right? It's like, we can't even imagine what will happen when we will have it, right? This type of service. I think that's definitely would be I don't like, to be honest, I'm not a big fan, and one of the reasons why I do the new space VC and angel list kind of syndicate is because I do have a lot of friends who call me and say, hey Alex, I like to watch what's happening, great things, so many things happening in space. I went to, interactive brokers and tried to look for kind of what are the ETF I can learn, invest, but there's not many, right? So I don't want to invest in old space, like in Boeing and Airbus. I want to invest in new space. How do I do that? And you're right, it's like it's not many ETFs, right? And especially now, China market is completely closed for non-Chinese kind of nationals, right? So Europe is like, a bit slow in that sector, right? So US as well, most of the companies are still private. So what do I do? That's why we actually now doing them. If people want to be in new space, I think one of the good opportunities is to be a venture investor, an angel investor. And of course, it's very risky. It's like not for everyone. People have to kind of fully understand this sector. But I also like it's not just about investments, right? It's like for me, I do feel my impact that I'm not. I mean, money making and biggest potential generational wealth creation opportunity, all those things, right, is great. But it's not main reason for me. Main reason for me is I want to create technologies, innovation, which will push the boundaries of our civilization, right? But also, I think what people mentioned to me, some of my investors, some of my friends, okay, like now angel list is very democratic, right? So you don't have to invest like 100K. You can invest single digit K, right, as an angel investor. And say, okay, fine, put like 5K into this deal. And then we have dinner with my kids. And the kids like, oh, say, okay, Daddy, what did you do? Oh, I have invested in this company which does robots on the moon. And it's so cool. And kids started talking about, oh, my daddy invests in this, kind of cool technology. They go start Googling, right? And they go next day, they go to the kids, to the teacher, they tell about. So it's kind of creating this positive wave of curiosity of, kids might get interested in STEM education or choose a degree in AI, robotics, moon economy, whatever it is, right? So it's kind of, for me, it's like also not just the business, but also social impact, hopefully. And I also like, people say, oh, I have to be billionaire. I can't invest in space. I cannot buy SpaceX because I have to put like 5 million, whatever, right? But it's like it's also the ways how people now can be more part of the this movement, part of this growing economy, and that's why that's what motivates me to do it. Sometimes very difficult, of course. It's like it's a lot of kind of
I love that.
diligence, yeah.
It's very inspiring, right? And I think investing can be like a really interesting lens into what's happening in the world, what's happening in the future. And I mean, it certainly makes me optimistic about the future. You can wake up some mornings and just feel, you read the news and doom scroll for like an hour in bed and you can feel really pessimistic. But when you look at some of like what we're doing with technology and innovation in space, but in lots of other areas as well, like there's a lot to be excited about how the world could be such an incredible place in the future.
Exactly. And I'm not just a VC investor. I'm also an angel investor by myself, and I'm part of many like syndicates or communities where like I look at the deals, and sometimes it's not about investing, but sometimes it's exactly what you mentioned is about reading what other people do, and you sit and look like, oh my god, some people who actually trying to mine helium free on the moon, right? And I'm sitting here and and trying to kind of analyze this financial statement of this company, but some people are actually building robots to go to the moon too. It's like that creates this kind of opens your mind about ambition, about perspective of other people, about possibilities, about innovation, about like everything, right? And it's I find it super exciting, super inspiring. Yeah.
Let's take an opportunity there to plug your Space Ambition Substack. You've got 57,000 subscribers. I think it's widely read. And I was reading a really interesting article you published on there just a few months ago specifically about like lunar resources, helium-3. So this is becoming one of my kind of go-to points to understand this sector better. Like we'll put a link to the Substack in the show notes and to your Angel List syndicate. But if you want to learn more about this, Alex and her partners really are a very valuable resource.
So the story behind Space Ambition is I started writing it 3 years ago as basically because I was trying to break into this sector, and I was like a banker. Right? I was like, okay, so where do I go? Where do I read? And then what I realized is like, because it's such a highly technical area, and if you want to spend 5-10 minutes reading something a day, which has no jargon, no like technical scientific engineering, or very purely financial statements kind of about, there's not nowhere to read, and and I was like, it's too easy or too difficult, or people write for people who've been in the sector for 20 years. And I was like, oh, okay, but I'm just a normal kind of person. Where do I go? So, and I started reading it and publishing something for my friends, for me. So I'm still writing it today as I'm writing it for me 3 years ago, right? So I hope that it can bring more people, but like it's like plain English, no, you don't need to have pre-existing knowledge about the industry, and it's like 5-10 minutes reading. Every Friday we publish a new article. Please please do sign up. It's one of the biggest, it is the biggest space tech blog on Substack now, and I think probably one of the biggest for investors, probably the biggest as well. So yeah, it's 57,000 subscribers. Every article we have like 30K people reading it, so it's and I do have a lot of people also messaging me. So of course, a lot of startups every day sending me decks, which is of course I do appreciate and I do like it. But also have other people messaging like, hey Alex, sorry, no, I made so much money on crypto. Now I want to invest in space. Where do I start? Right, and it's good to have. I do like these messages because it actually it's kind of people curious about okay I have would want to move from crypto, from like NFT kind of investors to space, or like a deep tech investment, right? So that's I think it's cool. I think it's that was keeps me going because I don't make money on this blog. For me it's mainly like spreading the good word, the good word, yes, about the investment. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that good work on Substack. And I think we on Wall Street Wildlife, in terms of our process of helping investors get started, we always say you have to begin from a place of curiosity and actually understanding the material company and the thing that's being built. And once only when you have some basic understanding ought you then go to doing the finances and looking for companies. So thank you for your tremendous offering in doing that work. And there's so much incredible information on that Substack blog. So that's your homework assignment, Wall Street Wildlife listeners. Check out Alice's Substack blog, which they could find at, what's the address, Alex?
Oh, it's Space Ambition .substack.com. Yeah.
Okay.
And where else can our listeners find you online, Alex?
The LinkedIn, Twitter, email, Substack, yes, all the social media. So, and as I mentioned, we do run an AngelList syndicate, which is the biggest AngelList space tech syndicate as of today. So AngelList overall is the biggest platform for angel investors. So the minimum check for typically is like $1,000. Some of the deals, some of the syndicators do. That's kind of the very democratic way for people to invest. We kind of, when we have a deal from the fund, sometimes we also have some allocation left, and we also say, okay, we can maybe post it, like is it like the poster of the deal, and then people can invest as well. So that's for accredited US investors typically. But I think you can click the link and have a look what we do here. It's more than 600 members as of today. And as I also mentioned, it's about curiosity, as you say, exactly right. So it's like feel free to ask me any questions as well if you have. Happy to provide more information, if people are interested.
Fantastic. Well, that was a really rich conversation. We got into a whole bunch of really interesting investment themes. We all learned a lot about space and investing in that sector. So thank you so much for your time on the Wall Street Wildlife podcast this week.
Thank you for having me. That was amazing.
A reminder that the people on this program may hold positions in the companies that are mentioned. Buying and selling stock carries financial risk, which could include loss of capital. The views in this program should not be taken as personalized advice. Before acting on any of the information provided, listeners are encouraged to consult a financial or tax professional.